Dear friends, we are in chapter 15 of our study of the Gospel of John. And in chapter 15, we have another I am saying of Jesus. In fact, the chapter will begin with the verse, I am the true vine and my Father is the vine grower. Now, just as we saw in chapter 10, wherein Jesus would say that I am the good shepherd, here we have another parable or a parabolic wherein he would say about the vine and the branches. Now let's remember that in the Old Testament, Israel was God's choice vine or the vineyard. Now we have got many verses in the Old Testament like Isaiah 5, 1-7, again in Isaiah 27, 2-6, Jeremiah 5, 10 or 12, 10-11, Ezekiel 15, 1-6, which will all speak about Israel as the vine or Israel as a vineyard that God has planted. And here in this particular section, chapter 15 of the Gospel of John, now Jesus is replacing that. Now, wherein he would say that I am the true vine. So the vine of the Old Testament, Israel, is now replaced by Jesus. And when Jesus says about the branches, it will refer to the followers of Jesus. It will refer to the Christians themselves. And then he would say, if you remain united to this vine, and then you will produce fruit. And so in this particular chapter 15, we can divide by 1-6. Jesus will speak about the vine and the branches. And then 7-17, he will speak about the love for each other, the love that the disciples should have for one another. Now, why is this vine chosen for this parable? Why did Jesus choose vine? Because the most dignified tree in Israel was the olive. We find that the olive with fine trunk and spreading branches, etc., was a very dignified tree. In fact, in Judges, in the book of Judges 9:8, there is a parable there about the many trees wanting to become kings, etc. And then there, olive is presented as a king of trees. But in Old Testament, let us remember, dear friends, that whenever Israel is spoken of as a vine or as vineyard, it will always have a reference to the unfaithfulness of Israel or the idolatry of Israel. So there is a lament over her degeneracy. So wine, of course, it was a national emblem of Israel. But this wine is presented in the Old Testament as always as representing the unfaithfulness of Israel. So you can think of those beautiful verses in the Bible, in the Old Testament, when God would say, I planted the vineyard and then I came looking for the fruit, and what I found was sour grapes, etc. Clearly pointing towards the unfaithfulness, clearly pointing towards the idolatry of Israel. And so when Jesus says, I am the true vine, it is in comparison with the degenerate vine, that is Israel. The ideal vine is now here, that is Jesus himself. Now look at again the constant command that Jesus gives in this first section. He would say to remain, that is that meinate en emoi, that is something that is repeated again and again. Remain in me, he would say. So as long as the followers are remaining in Jesus, then only they produce fruit, or else they will wither away. So again, it's a kind of a repetition that John is making use of, a Johannine technique. We found that in other places also, in the bread of life discourse, he will repeat, I am the bread of life. Or in the other parable we saw, I am the door, I am the good shepherd, etc. Jesus will repeat that. Herein again and again Jesus will repeat in several times. We can see in this section, I am the vine, remain in me, etc. is repeated, showing us the central message of this parable. From verse 12 onwards, 12-17, we have again a discourse on love. We already had a discourse on love in chapter 13, and now we have here in chapter 15 another discourse on love, a command to love one another. And so in third, it will say love one another again as Jesus has loved. Now that is something that is special here. Now Jesus' relationship with the disciples is very clearly presented in this section, wherein he would say they are friends to him, He has made known himself to them. He is the one who has chosen them. You did not choose me. Verse 16, you did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. And the section will end once again by saying, love one another. And so in verse 17 we read, I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. And so after the presentation of Jesus as a true vine and his followers as the branches, Jesus will present this discourse once again on love, asking the disciples to love one another just as he has loved them. Finally, after this, there is another section presented in chapter 15 from verse 18 onwards. It will once again speak about the world's hatred for Jesus and his disciples. And so just as he is going to be persecuted, and soon, we are in chapter 16, Jesus is soon going to be persecuted, he is soon going to enter into his passion, so also his disciples will be persecuted. That is that section from 18 onwards, that theme is again repeated. And then he will conclude this chapter, John will conclude this chapter by presenting once again a discourse, a short discourse on the Holy Spirit, on the Paraclete. And he will say, when the Paraclete comes, when the Holy Spirit comes, he will testify on behalf of Jesus. And so by presenting the hatred of the world to Jesus, towards his disciples, once again an assurance is given that the helper is coming, the advocate, the Paraclete is coming. Now that's how chapter 15 is ending. And so we have a very beautiful discourse here in this chapter 15. Let us very closely read this chapter, wherein Jesus is presenting himself as a vine, true vine, disciples as a branches. He is giving that command to love one another as he has loved them. He is speaking to the disciples of the persecutions or the hatred that the world will have towards them, at the same time assuring that the Holy Spirit is coming.